Adam, you gonna watch this? Let's do a program. Oh, you are. All right. How's everybody doing today? Good. Good. Did you guys get a chance to go see the reenactment today?
Yes.
Sweet. Pretty nice, right? How many first timers? Ooh, I like to see the first timers. All right. Who's gonna come back?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. All right. Everybody. I saw everybody. Well, guys, we want to welcome you to Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. My name is Bart Taylor and Matt Mulhern over here. We're both the new park interpreters here at the park. We've been here for a total of 3 months, and we've done the clothesline fair and the reenactment in those first 3 months. So you know it's been pretty impactful and pretty lambent. So it's pretty exciting for us. We're both into the Civil War reenactors, as you can see. Sometimes my hat doesn't fit over the hair, but I like to let that go. So we love this. We have a passion for this. And so we wanted to research something that made a connection not only to the Battle of Prairie Grove, but a connection to surrounding Arkansas. Whether it's the boys that fought for the 34th, the 1st Arkansas Cav, 1st Arkansas Artillery, so many Arkansasians, if that's how you say it, I guess it's a different word there. Arkansans, yeah. See, I just moved here 3 months ago, so. You think about those guys, and were they defending their home? There were plenty defending their home area. And then you talk about Charles and Austin Ryals. And that's why we wanted to jump into this subject, because you have 2 brothers who lived very close to here that joined different sides and fought for each other, right? And so you think about that today, 156 years later, right? What would it take for 2 brothers to go against each other? So we're going to find out today, okay? And again, our program will probably last a little over 30 minutes or so, and we're excited to have you guys here. After we're done, if you want to take pictures, talk to me and Matt, we'll talk to you. We're nice guys, all right? But over here, we have a few things we do definitely want you to see, and I'll explain that a little more in-depthly after we're done. But we did bring 2 real items that were used here at the Battle of Prairie Grove. Now, there's a shotgun that comes from Marmaduke's Cavalry. You probably saw Marmaduke's Cavalry kind of move over there on the right side today. So you're able to pick that up, kind of look it over. And we also have a carbine from the 1st Arkansas, which was Charles Ryals' unit that was stationed here. So that carbine was actually in the unit that Charles Ryals, the guy we're talking about today. So we want to make those connections not only with these facts and pictures that we're going to show you, but seeing the objects, right? That really can do that for you. Picking it up and actually feeling what those guys felt, right? So that's what we're offering today, and we're excited to have you guys here. So I want to start off talking about Charles and Austin Ryals. Like I said, both boys were born and raised in Arkansas. Now, if you start at the very beginning of the Civil War, you know that South Carolina seceded November 10th, 1860, right? And that started all the southern 11 states seceding from the Union, all right? Now, what was Arkansas's story in secession? Well, Arkansas seceded from the Union May 1861. And at that time, they started forming Confederate regiments, 48 infantry regiments, 30 cavalry regiments, 28 cavalry battalions, and 22 artillery regiments. That was what the Confederates took out of Arkansas throughout the whole war. Now, as pro-Union citizens or pro-Union folks came into Arkansas, you started to have your 11 United States Army units here. And the 11 are broken down as such. You had 11 infantry, it's a little bit more 11 infantry regiments, 6 cavalry regiments, and 2 artillery batteries. One of those 6 cavalry regiments is Charles Ryals' unit, right? So that's who we're talking about today. Now you talk about South Carolina, then Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and then the Confederacy fired on Fort Sumter, right? In 1861. Now, after firing on Fort Sumter, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina were the following 4 states that made that the 11 states of the Confederacy. Now, here's where we get into Charles Ryals' unit. The 1st Arkansas Cav, right? I told you there were 6 Arkansas regiments. The 1st Arkansas Cav was formed in July of 1862. And it was 1 month later that our Charles Ryals enlisted in the 1st Arkansas, August 1862. We've got some muster sheets here, some other muster sheets over there that you guys are going to be able to investigate there. Now, who was the commander of Charles Ryals' unit? Well, that was none other than Colonel Marcus LaRue Harrison. This is one of my favorite beards in the whole book of beards here at Prairie Grove. I mean, Mr. Max is good as well, but yes, I like Marcus LaRue Harrison. He'll come up again later. He was the commanding officer of the 1st Arkansas, and like I said, there's a funny story that he'll come up at the end of my program. Now you're wondering what Charles Ryals looked like. This is Charles Ryals. He enlisted in August 1862 for 3 years to serve in the Union Army. Like I said, out of those 6 cavalry regiments, he was part of that 1st Arkansas. Now, he was 19 years old, blue eyes, brown hair. At 19 years old, I was delivering sandwiches, right? At 19 years old, the Ryals Brothers were defending what they thought was right. A little different, right? Charles Ryals was listed as a farmer when he enlisted in the 1st Arkansas. Well, the 1st Arkansas, one of their first engagements was at Marion County, Arkansas, or excuse me, I'm sorry about that, was Newtonia, Missouri, in September 15th, all the way to October 15th. So they acted kind of as scouts and guides during that campaign, right? Not heavily engaged, but they were still used as scouts and guides. Well, you move up to the end of October, and does anybody know what this is? Elkhorn Tavern, right? If you've ever been to Pea Ridge, it's the famous house, right? And so many houses here, Morrow House, right? The Elkhorn Tavern have something to do with Prairie Grove, whether it's Van Dorn, Price, right? You've got those guys connected to our site as well as Elkhorn Tavern. Well, the 1st Arkansas was stationed at the Elkhorn Tavern after the battle. If you know about the battle, March 7th and 8th, 1862, a Union victory, a large Union victory, to secure the Arkansas advancement, trying to go into Missouri there. So, if you talk about the 1st Arkansas, you're going to talk about them being mostly scouts and guides there at the very, very beginning. Now, on December 5th, just like Herron's unit, and we'll talk a little bit more about Herron's unit, if you talk about Herron and his troops marched 130 miles to get here in 3 days, in 16 to 18 degree weather, with an attrition rate of almost 30 to 50% in some units. So when they got here, they had half the men they were bringing up that ridge, right? Pretty crazy. Well, they were called to help out Blunt's forces. You'll see Blunt's battle tomorrow over there on the other side of the field. But on December 5th, the 1st Arkansas was called to help Blunt's forces. They needed everybody here stacked, right? So the 1st Arkansas got to the Prairie Grove outskirts over there by the Illinois River and where the old Fayetteville Road met up. And on December 6th, the next day, they camped right here. Now, when you guys leave and you go out on 62 towards Farmington, look over to your left and you're going to see the Illinois River, right? Well, if you think about that, Fayetteville Road, that battlefield road that runs right out there, goes right up to what? The Illinois River. That's exactly where they were camping, right? Less than a mile from the battlefield, which is crazy to me. So you had the 1st Arkansas one day before Prairie Grove, camped just right over the ridge, right? So what was going on there? Well, Charles and this detachment, like I said, camped there. And at 7 a.m., December 7, 1862, the day the Battle of Prairie Grove happened, they set out their guidons, fluttering in the wind. As the sunrise comes over the Boston Mountains, they begin to splash through the Illinois River, right? So they're heading towards battle. Now, as they start walking, here's where it gets a little hairy, a little scratchy here. As the 1st Arkansas set across, they were going to run smack dab into 2,000 troops led by General Marmaduke. Remember I said Marmaduke a second ago? That's one of the shotguns from his actual unit right there. So Marmaduke's troops, 2,000 strong, with 6 guns, sets out to intercept not only the 7th Missouri, but the 1st Arkansas we're talking about right here, right? They're just over the river. They're going to try to intercept them. Well, the 7th Missouri moves forward, and as they move forward, Mr. Marmaduke detaches Mr. Joe Shelby, General Joe Shelby, with 450 troops. Those 450 troops moved forward on the 7th Missouri and took them by surprise. The 7th Missouri started to retreat back towards Fayetteville, back past the Illinois River, when Joe Shelby got the great idea to pick up those federal blue coats and put them on. Well, have we heard this before in the Civil War? Yeah, Manassas, right? Bull Run. You hear about blue coats fighting blue coats. Well, is this going to cause confusion? This is going to cause mass confusion. So Joe Shelby has his men, 450 strong, put those blue coats on, and he has the boys charge at the 1st Arkansas. Well, what happens next? One officer, a Union officer, said, "By the time the pursuing enemy was upon us, bearing our standard and wearing our blue overcoats, this was all confusion." So you can imagine, right? Are you supposed to shoot the guys coming forward in blue coats? Are you supposed to ask, "Hey, you friends?" What are you supposed to do? So, also to make matters worse, this brings up Harrison. Remember I told you Harrison would come back into play here? The guy with the good beard, right? Remember him? Okay. Well, Harrison's going to come into play here because not only is Harrison, he is the commanding colonel of the 1st Arkansas, but Rebecca Harrison decided to tag along and go meet some friends in Fayetteville. She had friends in Fayetteville that she wanted to go see. Well, you know, I'm just saying, maybe you wouldn't want to bring along your wife to a huge battle, right? And that's what happened. Now, it wasn't a big deal. She wasn't armed or anything, and neither was Mr. Harrison. But watching after her and making sure she fled before the actual retreat happened and before Shelby's troops attacked, that was crucial, right? So she was just kind of in the way sometimes, okay? So that's Rebecca Harrison, and again, my favorite beard there, all right? Since both units were dressed in blue, it was hard to know who was who. Confusion caused hand-to-hand combat right off the bat. So you can imagine, 1st Arkansas just woke up, and they're going across the river. They've got 20 wagons behind them, and they set out in columns of 4s. And they are overwhelmed by Joe Shelby's force of 450 guys in the blue coats. It was a hot, exciting battle. We were all mixed up, every fellow for himself, all dressed alike pretty much, except the hats were different style. They were wearing gray hats. Maybe that's the way to tell apart, right? So, to make that last matter worse, yes, like I said, Harrison said it was all confusion. And like I told you a second ago, it reminds me of Manassas and Bull Run. The confusion of Stonewall's troops, the confusion of that battle, right? If you study that battle, you know a little bit about that first battle of the Civil War that happened there, okay? Now, let's move on here, sorry. Notes keep sliding up here, sorry about that. Charles was never more than 1 mile across the field from his brother Austin, right? So can you imagine being in the Civil War and you are 1 mile away from one of your relatives, and it's possible that you might shoot your gun directly at him and his regiment. That's a thought right there, right? Can you imagine that didn't happen all of the time, but we wanted to talk about it here because it happened at Prairie Grove, right? Not only is Austin Ryals, the 34th Arkansas, those boys were all from around here. You're going to learn about that. So what were they thinking when they were setting out to fight this battle at Prairie Grove? After the embarrassment of their actions, the 1st Arkansas, what do you think they did? They were overtaken by Joe Shelby. So they start to retreat, right, back to Walnut Grove Church. And as they're retreating back to Walnut Grove Church, I told you about Herron, right? Herron's troops, he had sent the 1st Missouri Cavalry to come join as fast as they could, right? They're on their horses, they could get there quicker. And who comes to watch the retreat of the 1st Arkansas? Well, the 1st Missouri, right? They're there perfect time to make sure that the 1st Arkansas can retreat and do it well without suffering a lot of casualties and obviously a lot of prisoners, right? So, although the men performed poorly out of the 1st Arkansas, they captured 29 prisoners of Marmaduke's cavalry. So, they did something cool there. The 1st Arkansas lost 86 men altogether, 4 killed during Prairie Grove, 4 wounded, and 78 captured. Right? We talked about how quick that was. Shelby came upon them, so you can imagine there was a lot of guys to surrender. Right? Early in 1863, the first was engaged at Springfield, Missouri, Van Buren, and 3rd Kells Ferry on the Arkansas River. These were some of the last 3 engagements that Charles Ryals would be a part of with the 1st Arkansas. All right? Now, I told you about those 20 wagon trains, right, that were behind the troops, right? Whatever happened to those? Did Joe Shelby capture those? Like he did the coats? Well, yes, he did. He captured those wagons. The Arkansas quartermaster with all those wagons was trying to get them turned around and retreat. What do you think happened to him? Topples over, clogs up whole Fayetteville Road for the rest of the battle, right? And Harrison, again, someone I've used 3 times or more, plus I talked about his wife being at the battle. Harrison even said they captured our regimental papers and our books, right? So all of their stuff, the personal items, bedding, tack, ammo, personal items, regimental books, papers were all taken at that as well. So it was not a good battle for the 1st and Charles Ryals. Charles was listed as AWOL sometime in March and April of 1863, okay? But Charles did show up in mid-April to help defend or help fight at the Battle of Fayetteville with the 1st Arkansas. Guys, finally, the 1st Arkansas redeemed themselves from the Battle of Prairie Grove. They actually fought hard and were able to help others in the battle. When at Prairie Grove, they were the ones being helped out quite a bit, right? So, what happened with Charles? Let's figure this out. Let's end this program on a high note here. Charles went on a furlough right after 1863 and got married to his wife. And Charles returned after his furlough to become a nurse, a cook, and in 1864, March of 1864, he joined Major Hunt's howitzer crew. So, he went from cavalry, nurse, cook, to what? Artillery, right? Pretty cool, right? He had a plethora of experience there. Now, on April 9th, 1865, anybody got that date? April 9th, 1865. What happened that day? General Lee, right, surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. The Army of Northern Virginia surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant. Well, guys, less than 4 months later, August 23rd of 1865, Charles Ryals musters out of the 1st Arkansas, out of the howitzer crew that he's with, and he's paid $100. $100 flat for all his service. Pretty crazy. He's paid $100, and guys, here's a picture of Charles right here. Charles would go on to have 11 children right here. And this was taken in 1910. Old Charles. You saw young Charles, and there's old Charles right there. He had 11 children and would go on to die in 1911. Now, right now, if you go back into Oklahoma, as all the connections with this battle happened, Arkansas, Indian Territory at the time, his gravesite is the Blue Springs Cemetery in Gideon, Oklahoma. You can visit Charles Ryals. He's buried next to his wife and one of his children, one of his sons, right? So, that's Charles Ryals. And if you guys have any further interest in the 1st Arkansas, you're more than welcome to go to Carroll County, Arkansas, and you have a sesquicentennial, set up a bunch of signs, not only here at the park, but all over Arkansas. You can see the 1st Arkansas sign as well, right? And that's Charles Ryals' unit, the one we've been talking about this whole time. Now, you talk about the first part of the battle. You guys saw that today, right? When you saw the reenactment. Now, when Matt comes up here to explain about the 34th Arkansas, it just so happens that Austin Ryals participated in the heaviest part of the fighting, but also finished out the fighting as well. So it's kind of ironic that his brother was in the very beginning of the fighting, and his other brother, finishes that up, right? And again, I want to bring that up. They were no more than 1 mile from each other this whole time. So I wonder if they felt that, right? You wonder if they felt each other around being a mile apart there. So again, those are the things about Charles Ryals that I wanted to get out in my research. And he's one of those guys, again, that 19 years old. His brother was a little bit older. So they had to have their differences, right? I have a brother. We have our differences. So I want Matt to explain some of those things to you. And again, after stay put so we can kind of show you about some of the guns and things we have too. Matt will explain what's going on with that.